this is extraordinary, this strike here. I mean, to hear Wes Streeting, he's written in the Telegraph today, and he's sort of talking like this already, referring to the BMA like they're a cartel. I mean, you would never have heard those words about the BMA, really. They don't feel like they're one of those unions that feel like they're very bullish, but they are digging their heels in, and this doesn't look like it's going to get solved very quickly. 5 consecutive days of striking on the way. A lot of the time, strike is about, can you get public opinion on your side? I suspect the doctors probably are losing some of that public opinion, Sara, at the moment.
Well, surprisingly, I'm actually very supportive of what the Health Secretary is doing and the messaging that he's putting out there, because he is up against it in terms of waiting lists, in terms of reform of the NHS, where criticism is raining down on him constantly, and, trying to have these pay settlements and everything else since their arrival into government has been a priority. So the fact that the BMA still isn't satisfied with what resident doctors have received, which is, I think we were discussing this, an overall 30% rise, is quite astounding. And it seems as if the NHS might be able to cover the gaps that are going to be here as a consequence of the strikes. But it's still quite shocking that actually, if you think about the NHS as a whole, there is still the detractors.
So, Caroline, just to clarify, so the BMA are saying that they want a further 26% pay rise for resident doctors over the next few years. I'm not saying that immediately. And their sort of justification is that they say that, in real terms, pay has fallen by around 20% since 2008. I mean, the stats won't lie, and there's probably a lot of truth in that. It's probably all true. But it's that reality, isn't it? We're all in a world today, and people at home are going, we're all having to make sacrifices. Lots of us are not getting pay rises. Some people are getting pay cuts. Some people are getting less hours at work, probably losing their jobs. We've all got to take a hit. The reality of getting to what you think you really should be getting and some is gone, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, resident doctors got in the mid-2000s to 2000. They had got some, significant pay rises. But show me a public sector worker in the country who has got the level of pay, perhaps, that they had in 2008. And this idea that you can go back to 2008 and say, we want to have it on a par with that, is just ridiculous. They have had, as Sara said, nearly 30% pay rise when the Labour government came in, and Wes Streeting was condemned for conceding that. They've also been offered another 5.4% this year. Now, what Wes Streeting has said, and I was actually at the conference when he made his speech in Manchester on Wednesday, is that he has worked really hard to recognise, that's why he gave the nearly 30%, that's why he's given the 5.4%, which is larger, I think, than any other health worker. But he's also saying he is going to make sure that the extra costs that resident doctors have for their professional development, that will be paid for. He does recognise there's a shortage of speciality doctors' roles for them to go into, so he's increased that by 1,000. But what he's said as well is some of the reforms they need to make are going to take some time. So, yeah, it may be about pay, but it's also about conditions at work, and every trust has been asked to make sure, against a 10-point plan to support resident doctors, that they are meeting those principles. So it's going to cost, they reckon, £240 million to pay for things like consultants doing extra shifts, senior doctors doing extra shifts, let alone the number of people who may not get what they need this weekend. But the message is also, I have to say, from the Health Service, please, if you've got an appointment, turn up, because there's always a worry that people won't because they think they just won't be anybody there. Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, that's the argument, isn't it, on the cost, that when you look at how much this costs, would it actually just be worth saying, here's the money to stop it happening? Because if it goes on and on and on, and that's the suggestion that this will happen, even though Wes Streeting is saying we've got no more pay, we're going to make some other concessions and try to make it helpful for you, but the Health Service can't afford that money.
No, but this has always been the challenge, is that if you give public sector pay rises and if you give them across the board, as happened when the Labour government came in, there are minor inflationary impacts of that as well. But what about the police? What about nurses? What about other groups of public servants? If you keep giving in to demands through strikes, then this could potentially be never-ending. And that's why I think it's important for the Health Secretary to set a marker down to say, no, you can't have that. And, Adil, you're right. People in the private sector, people who don't have public pensions and don't have the certainty of that work, we are facing a really big economic crisis. Unemployment went up this week. You know, inflation still hasn't slowed to that level. So I think it's really unfair for resident doctors to have taken settlements and pay deals and still, you know, I think it's reckless because this is about people's health. We are still not a healthy nation. We are trying to get to grips with waiting lists and, you know, there has to be some recognition of that in the whole of the system.
I mean, long term, though, I mean, they are doctors and they're such an important part of what we do. And look at what we've been through in recent years with the pandemic, and we so relied on the NHS and the doctors and the hard work they do. Long term, though, if doctors don't get what they want, and if people thinking about getting into medicine look, well, that job's not going to pay me what I want it to be, are we going to lose the very best of doctors?
But
and there is that worry, and we have to look at that.
But I think something for years 1, 2, it's around 40 to 45,000, and it can rise to up to something like 80,000. Then there are other additions on top that you can earn. So, you know, in terms of, you know, workforces, you know, they're not poorly paid, you know. I mean, there's a lot of other people in our health service we rely on, as well as doctors, to keep us safe. But the other issue here is about workforce planning. It is fair that the resident doctors are saying they've been trained, and when they've done their general training, the system is you go into a speciality, whatever that may be, orthopaedics, psychiatry, whatever. And what they're saying is there's a shortage of places for them to go into. Now, that is a legacy of the last decade and more of not planning for the sort of career progression for these resident doctors. Now, Wes Streeting has said he absolutely wants to deal with that and recognise that these, you know, young doctors and not so young doctors after 7 years of being a resident doctors do need to know where their future is in the NHS. And that's something he's absolutely committed to put right.
OK, so what's the answer to resolve this then? Is it going to get to a situation where these strikes are banned?
I don't think you should ever ban a strike. I think you should be allowed to express and withdraw your labour.
So whatever the disruption, whatever the cost,
you should be allowed to do it. But I think that there needs to be a recognition that not everybody within the BMA, not everybody in the resident doctor community actually support this strike. And you know, when I was in government, we brought in legislation that ensured that there was a popular mandate for the strike within that union. I think the Labour government has said that they're going to repeal it, but this is why it's really important, because today you will read reporting that says, actually, not everybody voted in the last
ballot. It says here in the
surveys.
Times, only 33% of BMA junior doctors, resident doctors, said they agreed to the strike should go ahead, and that's a survey by Savanta that's been shared with the Times. So, I mean, that's quite a bold statistic, isn't it? Only 33% actually said they agreed it should go ahead.
That is one poll, but
I mean, look, I support the right people in the trade union, like other rights that we have, and I think it would be a slippery slope if we got rid of that. But, you know, to everybody who is a member of the BMA eligible to vote for these strikes, go and vote. If you don't support it, go and vote.
OK, well, let's find out, because we're running a poll at the moment on X and we're asking you, are striking doctors bullying the country? Let's take a look at the results so far. 73% of you said yes. 27 so far said no. Keep voting, keep your views coming in. It's something we're going to be debating later in the programme.
Yeah, we'll be speaking to Dr Pasha Mukherjee, who's a GP. He'll be talking on behalf of the BMA, and Charlie Rowley, former Conservative government advisor, will be with us just after 7 to debate that. Now, let's move on to the other side, the BBC. So, they've apologised to President Trump, and he'll be fine now, won't he? He'll be like, oh, it's OK, they've apologised, it's OK, we can move on. He's going to be happy with that. It's not about money for him, is it?
Well, maybe he will be happy with that. We don't know. We haven't heard back from him yet, have we? But
he might do that. They send me a wonderful apology.
maybe.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful apology.
apology.
It's the best apology in the world.
Maybe if we put it in marble and put some gold around it, maybe he can hang it in the new ballroom in the White House. But I think, look, it was totally reasonable and right and necessary for the BBC to apologise for those mistakes. But the idea that he's going to sue the BBC for £1 billion, I think, is a little bit ridiculous.
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah, maybe he'll sue us in pounds, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, look, the BBC is going through its moment of crisis, and we're all going to obsess about the fact that it's Trump because he is so newsworthy. But let's just remember, he's suing on something that's called defamation. And in this country, if you pursue that, you actually have to prove that there has been some element of harm as a consequence of the actions taken. And I think most courts would say that you weren't particularly, you as an individual, were harmed by this.
I mean, he has to do it in the US now because the time frame he's lost the chance to be able to do it here, and he will do it in the US because he'll know the system there. But the BBC defence is based on the US system, and they've come up with a number of things. That actually they had no rights to, and it did not distribute that episode in the US. iPlayer, you can't watch iPlayer in the US for those that go away on holiday and trying to find something. iPlayer doesn't work. So there's a number of issues that they've raised there. But it doesn't end there for the BBC because more revelations that actually this is prior to the Panorama documentary that a similar edit was done on the Newsnight show. I mean, to make the mistake once in an organisation is bad enough. To make it twice is pretty.
And the BBC are investigating.
The BBC are investigating.
Look, I think the BBC are right to apologise, and also given that we heard about this Newsnight one, which wasn't, if you like, as forthright in terms of what was being said about Donald Trump's...
It was actually raised on air at the time, wasn't it?
Agitation of the riots that happened on that particular day. Yeah. It still was in the same ballpark. And I think what comes out of this is just how slow the BBC can be sometimes to deal with these issues, not just on politics, but in other areas of editorial oversight and control. And in some ways, it's that lethargy, that slowness that has contributed to this. I mean, we wouldn't really be having this conversation and there'd been that email that had been leaked. I think lots of news and current affairs organisations will have situations sometimes when something goes wrong, but it's how you respond to that and how quickly you respond to that. As to Donald Trump, at the end of the day, at the time, he did claim that the election result was wrong. Well, that was fake news. It wasn't wrong. It's been held up all over the place that actually the win was right. Did he lose money? I think it's going to be hard to prove. But I think as a result of all the email leaks and what's happened since, it's not surprising that he came out strongly to say, I want an apology and to threaten some money. He has got money back from US networks. But then, again, those networks are private. This is our licence fee money that would end up paying this. And let's hope an apology will suffice. But the BBC has to sort itself out.
Well, we've got Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, on later. The trouble is now it's sort of opened a whole can of worms, hasn't it? That everybody's jumping on the bandwagon and where there are fingers to be pointed about things that haven't been done in the way that people wanted it. That's what's coming out now. How long do you think it's going to take for that to die down, or does change need to happen?
Well, I mean, this is one of the questions that is in my mind, because you've had these two very senior resignations now from the BBC, is what is the Culture Secretary going to do about it? Because ultimately that is the department that sponsors and appoints board members. And does the Culture Secretary still have confidence in that board to do its job? I think those are really legitimate questions to ask. I mean, I used to work at the BBC. I value what the BBC contributes. I think that it can do more. It probably needs to think about what is the place of the BBC in a modern streaming society. But those are things that actually the Culture Secretary should be considering, because there is going to be the charter renewal soon, the document that basically governs BBC.
And, you know, it's worth saying about the BBC, and I think it has been said, but, you know, it's thousands of journalists at the BBC who do incredible work, you know. And, I speak to a friend of mine who works in local BBC report. The stuff that he does is just incredible. That nobody else in the country is doing that stuff in the Midlands, you know. And that local reporting, some of that undercover reporting, investigative reporting the BBC does, thousands, and it's almost inevitable that there's going to be some mistakes, you know, and there's been lots of mistakes, and there always will be.
Exactly, and there always will be some mistakes. And the situation is when you identify a mistake or someone puts it in front of you, there's been a mistake, how do you handle it? How do you deal with it? And, you know, what sometimes happens, and this is, I mean, with the Charter Review and everything, there are some people, let's be honest about it, who would like to see the BBC not exist anymore. They would like to see the end of the TV licence and all of that. But what the BBC cannot do, and I say this as someone who supports our diversity within our broadcasting system, is always go to this sort of paranoia that they've all got it in for us. If you've made a mistake, you have to deal with it. And you can't just ignore that or deflect that into this is a conspiracy to try and get rid of the BBC. This is a problem of their own making that they should have resolved.
OK, do you think that Lisa Nandy should fire the board, then?
Well, I think the board needs to be looked at, because one of the things about the board, from what I understand, from what I've read, is that when the BBC wanted to make apology, you know, the operational staff of the BBC, the board sat on it for something like a week. So I think there's real questions about why would they sit on the BBC coming out and making a public apology. That seems weird to me because it festered for a week.
Some of those intentions are of some of those board
Well,
members. Have they got bigger plans for the BBC that are at odds with the BBC and odds with a lot of journalists?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, these are a lot of these are political appointments. It's been done on different guys.
But it's up to Lisa Nandy to have a proper look at it.
To sort
we will
that
speak
out.
to her when we have her on the show later. There is news on ahead of the budget to come, but I just want to talk about Sara Sharif, this 10-year-old girl who was killed at the hands of her father and her stepmother so horrifically, cruelly. And, you know, it is such an upsetting thing to happen. As a mother of a 10-year-old, you know, my heart just goes out to her because it's unimaginable. And now this review into what happens shows a series of failures didn't protect her. Her death was avoidable and preventable. I mean, it is just staggering, isn't it, to read what happened and the mistakes that were made and how this little girl could still be here today.
Yeah, and it is... When you look at the report or certainly the news today, and you think about the fact that Sara Sharif, as a 10-year-old, was put under special protection orders from birth because her father was known as a domestic abuser and had attacked children previously as well. And so there was a picture that was already there. So what were the failings that led to her eventual death? And, you know, it was things like, when we were discussing this earlier, things like them going to the wrong address when they needed to be checked on.
That is quite incredible, isn't it?
But the thing that gets me about this is that when you read the detail of the things that have gone wrong, and I hate playing the blame game because people who work in child protection and child support in local authorities do a really difficult job under straitened circumstances. So I don't want to play a blame game, but this is a really horrifically tragic story. And so what are we actually going to take from it? In this world where you have all this data, all this information, all this new technology, why can't we just make these simple things work? And the one thing that I would say is, what are we going to do with this report now that we have these findings?
We have report after report, don't we? And yet
nothing
this
changes.
Still happens. How is it that in this day and age, this can happen to a child and failings allow it to happen again?
Well, I don't think another inquiry or another report is going to tell us what previous inquiries haven't already told us. I think, if anything, I would like government to actually look at all those recommendations from previous inquiries when we've seen children lose their lives when they shouldn't have done, and really say, not only have the recommendations of those been embedded, has the culture changed? What you need, whatever guidelines government might give, whatever laws there are, you know, when you're dealing with the protection of children, there has to be, you know, a huge part of professional curiosity, call it being nosy, maybe, to find out what's going on. In the initial cases when this little girl was born, actually some of the social workers then were very, very on it in terms of identifying the problems. And there was something to do with the guardian of the court, who's another spokesperson in this in the interests of the child. That person's views were weighed over those social workers. What is inexcusable, though, is that when it was decided to, instead of have Sara have the opportunity to be adopted, she was given back to her biological father, omitted from the report to the judge on which the judge made their judgment.
That is incredible, isn't it?
They omitted the domestic violence and violence of this man. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand why, if that was a mistake that was made, why there wasn't action to then seek a way to go back to court. But it was left to lie for another 4 years until she died at 10.
Do they just say, well, that's just an easy fix? It's just easy. It just goes back to the father. We'll just ignore this bit of information because it's going to...
I think there are lots of checks and balances that you have to weigh up in different kinds of policies that are set. So, for example, there is a predisposition, I think it still exists, it certainly was a while ago, that actually one is better leaving children with their biological families instead of putting them up for adoption. And that would be something that would be considered in the balance of the judgment.
All right.
We've got a statement from the Chief Executive of Surrey County Council, so let's bring that to you now. Sara's death is absolutely devastating, they say. We share our sincere condolences with all those affected. The independent safeguarding review took place to consider the practice of all agencies throughout Sara's life. We welcome both the national and local recommendations in the report, and we take the findings with utmost seriousness. But, you know, as we're saying, let's just hope it means that this won't happen again and, you know, other children can be protected as a result of these findings.
I think about her siblings, you know, and you think, I hope they're getting the right care.
Well, they're in
now.
Pakistan, some of them, aren't they? Or now, aren't
apparently,
they?
Yeah.
But the other thing is looking for changes in behaviour. When someone takes a child out of school for homeschooling...
Well, this is one of the recommendations.
For goodness sake.
Yeah.
So,
question, they didn't see that child.
Okay.
A child protection expert talks about that. So, you know, let's hope that those findings are followed up.
Absolutely.
Should we talk about budget?
Yeah, well, let's like Rachel Reeves. This is a U-turning here. It's, well, we don't know whether she's U-turning because we don't really know what she's going to do. There's lots of speculation that she was going to raise income tax. But now the Financial Times are reporting that she's ripping up early proposal to raise basic and higher income tax. They reckon that she has communicated to the OBR, that's the Office for Budget Responsibility, that it won't be happening. What do we read into this, Salma? Has she sort of tested the water? Can I get away with this?
They're worried about
everyone goes, you know what? No, we don't want our taxes going up.
Absolutely no idea what's going on now here. Because we've been put here, shown this, shown that. We've had these dramatic statements coming out of the media room at
preparing us all for what's to come.
We've had these like little signals that say, "Oh, well, you know, manifestos can be broken," or whatever it was that she said.
That's a great impression.
Yeah,
I don't know
it's
who, but it was
exactly like Rachel.
You haven't got the voice.
We don't. Not RADA trained. Yeah. I just don't know where we are. But also, I think it's pretty appalling that before a budget where you're supposed to stay stum about everything, that there's just been so much media with the Chancellor herself basically winding up the speculation about what's going on.
Are they sort of testing the water, trying things out and seeing how unpopular they are and rolling back?
But that is not that. But that's not the way we do things. That's not the way we do things. And it's, you cannot be the Treasury where you just sort of run things up the flagpole and go, oh, well, people... Who's going to say, yeah, do you know what I really want? My taxes go up.
Especially when we were told it wouldn't.
If it's not income tax rises, then where is she going to find it?
Because there's a big black hole, isn't there?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, obviously there's VAT, potentially. There is on assets of those who've got assets that create a huge amount of wealth.
Why did you point at me when you... assets? Excuse me, that's not me.
Sorry, I'm keeping my eyes like this.
There's assets?
Would you like to share with the nation?
I wish I had. If I had those kind of assets, we wouldn't be separate.
I apologise for any insinuation that you are going to be a victim.
She sent me an apology, I'm fine.
So, anyway, there are other options, but it is just bizarre. I mean, it's been happening for quite a few years now, more and more pre-budget discussion and what have you. Silence is golden because actually, you know, every time there is an intimation of what is going to happen, it does affect the sort of confidence in the markets and amongst businesses. So she is, what is it, a 30 billion black hole that they have to fill.
To be.
I'm just looking forward to, be quite frankly, the budget happening, us knowing where we are and just dealing with it, because all this speculation is just getting a bit boring now.
Is really worrying, and we had the growth figures yesterday, and there's just a real worry about the situation the country's in.
It's not just that, but you know, if there is a move to tax assets or capital gains, most people who own a home, most of their wealth is in that home. Okay. Right. You know, people don't tend to have loads of stocks and shares and, you know, loads of investments. You know, that's where the majority of UK's wealth is. And that means that there probably aren't that many transactions happening. People aren't putting their houses on the market. Right. People aren't wanting to sell.
Because that is their main,
because they're worried about what's coming in the budget and they don't want to make decisions. And this is why you stay stum about it, because you still need the economy to keep going. So I think it's inappropriate. I think if she's not putting income tax up, but she's, you know, marched everyone up to the top of the hill, that's also a silly thing to have done. And if she's not going to give us a proper plan on how we're going to cover the black hole, it's going to be bad for them.
OK. Now, listen, before we wrap things up, should we move on to pub quiz?
Move on to pub quiz, yeah. I mean, is it that time already?
Topic of the day.
The pub's open. Can we go to the pub quiz?
Because this pub, the Barking Dog in Urmston in Manchester, suspected one team was doing rather well, so they turned detective and realised that this particular pub quiz team had been cheating. And, Sam, we were talking about it. I mean, who would ever do that, honestly?
Define cheating.
Or what you do in your pub quiz. Come on,
Is
what
it
do you
justified?
do? Come on.
If if somebody's talking out loud and they think they've got the right answer and you manage to earwig that, I don't think that
Oh, well,
is
that's
an
not
issue.
cheating. No, that's okay. That's all right. That's okay.
If maybe you want to check a fact around the question...
Whoa, you mean on your phone?
Cheating?
Well, this is what... At this quiz, now, we can't identify the team, but what they did was... So phones were banned. You're not allowed to take your phones out. We all know that quiz. But they had these sort of watches that you can speak... Smartwatches. So they were whispering the questions into their watches.
Identifying bits of music and all sorts. Caroline, you're a bit of a quiz, though. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I don't like that sort of cheating. If you overhear something, but actually looking at your watch and these wearables and this sort of thing is just really bad. But people take it really seriously about this. I once went to a pub quiz where my daughter invited us along to join her team, and we'd never been to this pub before. And when you walked in the room, it was like the tumbleweed, because they all looked at you.
Because you're newbies.
You're a ringer. Where have you come from this? So, I don't know. But anyway,
Suspicion.
this is, you know, I think if we did a poll of the country, we'd find that this is a issue and a problem, not just at the Barking Dog, but the Cat and Parrot and every other
We need to
pub
change
in
the law.
No, I just think...
GPT, does Caroline Flint...
I always like that as being Secret Service, you know, we're coming through.
If Salma walks into a pub quiz now, everyone's going to be like, oh, we know what she's going to be up to. Keep an eye on that one.
Prove it.
Sneaky Googling when she thinks no one's looking.
Salma and Caroline, thank you very much.
We'll be speaking to the owners of that pub later, and they can tell us all about their detective tactics and how they track down the cheaters.